So thank you all for coming. So Cindy and I sort of had known each other casually for a number of years, but not very well until more recently. And we both took a very long break from weaving and then started up again. And probably last year, we started running into each other more often and just saying, oh, how do you do that? And oh, I don't do it that way. And well, I do it like this. And I said, well, it would be really interesting sometime to do a talk and just explain to people the different ways that you can do tapestry. And so then when this show was announced and then we were asked, do we want to do a program? We said, well, maybe it's time to do that talk. So I'm going to talk about how I work. Cindy's going to talk about how she works. We also have a weaver in the show, Stephanie Hoppy, who lives in Ukiah, and she weaves differently than we do. We're going to talk about hers a little bit. So we're both going to do some visuals here with the screen, and then we're going to hold up more work of Cindy's, myself, Stephanie, and Elaine Todd. We asked them if they would bring some extra work for us to share. And then we're going to talk a little bit about different ways of finishing work, and we'll be able to turn them around and show you the backs and such. So that's what we're going to do today. So I was in the weaving program from 1979 to 82, and I spent about 15 years weaving tapestries. Started out on my floor loom and eventually got an upright tapestry. And since then, that's the way I've woven. So I weave from the front of the tapestry, and a lot of people weave from the back. And people sometimes wonder about why would you do that? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that also. Cindy weaves on a floor loom. Stephanie weaves on a Navajo style loom with no treadles, and I'll explain a little more about that later. And then we have pieces in the show from Elaine Todd and Jackie Wallenberg, and those pieces are done on foam core. So if you look at the necklace I have on, this is one that I made many years ago, and it was also done on a foam core board. So for that, you take several layers of foam core, stack them together, tape them together so you have a nice sturdy surface. And then instead of having an actual loom, you put pins along the top and the bottom, and you string a very thin yarn up and down. So Jackie puts 8 pins per inch on the top and 8 on the bottom. When you go back and forth, it gets doubled, so it's 16 ends to the inch. So they're very fine pieces. And we have some wonderful examples in the gallery of that particular way of weaving. So when I was in the program, I'm not sure at the very beginning, Lolly, if you had Jean-Pierre coming, but
yeah, it was
from the very beginning.
79.
Oh, okay. So Jean-Pierre Larochette and Ernestine Bianchi came from the San Francisco Tapestry Workshop for, I believe, a month, and taught us how to weave. And in that month, I managed to weave a little sample and a little piece about this big, which I neglected to bring, but
Eleanor's, it was a piece from that class is on the wall in the exhibit.
Right, and it's a really wonderful, beautiful piece.
10-inch square.
Wow. So
come down front.
So the way that we wove was from the back. Now, Jean-Pierre's family, he has a family history of Aubusson tapestry weavers, and Gobelin and Aubusson are the two most well-known tapestry centers in France. And that is the way they weave. Aubusson tapestries are woven on a low warp loom, which would be like our floor loom, but without the extra harnesses that you would use for pattern weaving. And Gobelin weaving is done traditionally on an upright loom, also known as a high warp loom. So in that month, I learned to weave from the back. and pretty much from the very start said, I don't like weaving that way. I want to weave from the front. So all my pieces have been woven that way. And I've continued to do that. And a few years ago, Jean-Pierre, his daughter, Yadine Larochette, and with the collaboration of Jean-Pierre's wife, Yael Loury, produced a book that's called The Anatomy of Tapestry Weaving. And it is how to weave tapestries in the traditional French style of aubusson weaving from the back. So I got a copy of the book and I read it and I tried to figure out why did this develop in this particular part of the world as the way of weaving, as opposed to many other parts of the world where you don't weave that way. And I just thought I would share some of my thoughts about that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some terminology because we have a lot of people here who aren't weavers. So I'm going to just back up a little bit. So the warp threads are the ones that go on the loom. And in the type of tapestry we're showing here, they get completely covered up as opposed to some other types of weave structures. The weft is what gets passed back and forth. And in this style of tapestry, it's generally completely covering the warp and is a discontinuous weft. So it's not going all the way from edge to edge. And you can build up shapes or you can weave all the way from selvage to selvage, depending on the type of tapestry weaving you do. So in looking at the book and thinking about the way I weave, I came up with a few conclusions, one of which is talking about joins. So with most weaving, well, with tapestry weaving, when two colors meet in the vertical direction, or on a floor loom this way, but when in the warp direction, it creates a slit. So slits are fine, but they're not very as good structurally if they get very long. So you can make slits, you can leave them intentionally as part of your design. You can sew them up either while you're weaving or after you're weaving, or you can make joints. And there's various types of joints, but the two I'm going to talk about are the single weft interlock and the double weft interlock. So with the single weft interlock, you're coming from behind one warp thread and over, and they're crossing and they're going back. They come together, they cross, and you just keep doing that. Well, with that kind of join, they're meeting in between the two warp threads. It is a strong join, but it has a slightly more toothy appearance than a double weft interlock. Double weft interlock, you have that first connection, then the one color goes over, comes back, and they cross a second time before this one takes off in this direction. So that's the double weft interlock. Most people believe they have to be done from the back of the weaving because it creates a ridge. Well, I wanted a nice strong join and I didn't want to weave from the back. So I said to myself, can't you just reverse the movement? There must be a way to do this. So that's what I've done. I've always done it. But I think a lot of weavers think that they want these nice clean joins. They want to be able to use that technique. And so that's what they do. So that was one of my thoughts about why do people weave from the back. Then there's hatchings and hachures, which are design elements that allow you to transition from one color to another, either in one pass of one color, one pass of another. And it creates an intermediary color between the two that you're working with, or in stepped hachures, which is where you weave over, then you stagger it, and you get a transition of shades. So looking at the book and reading, I'm not sure, but I think it's possible that those may be faster to weave from the back. But there's a definite pattern that in working with these steps that I think visually might be easier working from the back. So some weavers, such as Jean-Pierre, who collaborates with his wife, Yaya Lori, in their wonderful tapestries, they use some very symmetrical hachures in their designing quite regularly and beautifully. And I think that may be, like I said, an easier way to visually keep track of where you are. I don't tend to weave with that style. I do use hatching and hachures, but in a much more random and loose way. So that's one thought. And then my last thought on that is that these large workshops would weave big pieces designed by one person and woven by a team of weavers. So weavers are going to be sitting next to each other at a large loom and weaving. Well, you can't have them doing what I do, which is deciding as you go where you're going to be, putting your hachures, because you'll end up with a very strange looking tapestry. So having these rules that are laid out in the book so beautifully allows people to keep the style of the weave the same throughout the whole piece when multiple people are weaving on it. So those are my thoughts. Anything else you'd like to contribute, anybody? Okay. All right. So I wove for about 15 years. And then I just kind of got tired of how long they took. And I was also working, and I switched and started making jewelry. And so I did that up until recently. And I eventually created a website, which is what you're looking at on the screen. And it was all jewelry at that point. And so in 2019, I decided to start weaving again. And after I'd done a few, I thought, well, I guess that's where I'm going these days. So I took my website and I added tapestries and kept the jewelry both on the same website because I still have a lot of jewelry for sale. So, so this is what I ended up doing with my website. And so we're going to look a little bit at this, and I'm going to talk about some of the pieces. And
Would it be useful to have the lights off now?
I have no idea.
I think it's fine, because then we can see you.
We can't see her.
We can't see. Yes, well, she's the voice.
Okay.
You can see her up on the screen.
That's
Uh,
not her.
It is.
Yes. Is that you?
Yeah,
Yes, it is.
But it's an angle, it's a weird angle. It is, it's like opposite.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So EllenAthensDesigns.com. So on my homepage, I basically just picked pieces that kind of had a similar shape. So this is the homepage here. And I guess I will just go directly to the gallery page. Okay, so all right. So the way this website is set up, you have your choice of going over here to see jewelry or over here to see tapestries. So that's what we're going to do. And when I put them on my page, I decided not to put my pieces by year or by theme. I just said, I'm just going to mix them all up. So that's the way they are, except that the newer pieces are at the beginning. So I'm going to skip those for now and come back to them in a minute. If I can
brighten the light on your computer. There's a little symbol. for
Robin,
that.
get up and go around.
You
I think it would be,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that better?
maybe it's a.
Might be as bright as it
Yeah.
can be.
it might
That's
be-
the screen on the computer is bright. I don't know.
okay.
Suzanne thinks we should have the light in the room on to make the,
Also, we're taking the video, so to have Ellen lit up for the recording. The technology.
Okay. So those other pieces were newer, so I'm going to come back to them. So I got to do a class when I was at the apprenticeship program with Martha Stanley, who is a famous rug weaver. And one of the things that we did in our little sample was wedge weave. So I've done some pieces that are all wedge weave and some that combine regular horizontally woven tapestry and wedge weave. So this piece is all wedge weave with some sumac lines to give a little bit of surface texture. I don't know if you can see, but there's some lines in there of the sumac.
Yeah.
So what creates wedge weave is that normally you have your warp is straight and your weft is going perpendicular. With wedge weave, you start weaving a little triangle in the corner and you continue weaving at that angle to wherever you want to stop, and then you change, and then the next row goes in the other direction. And the pressure of weaving those weft yarns at an angle pushes the warp so that you get that that scalloping that's typical of a wedge weave. So some people do some really crazy and wonderful things with it, as you'll see with a couple of Stephanie's pieces in the gallery. So the edges might be symmetrically scalloping like this one, or they might come and go. And it's just the different pressure against the warp that's creating that type of edge. So let's see. Okay, we'll go to this one. So then at some point I did 2 pieces based on the rock formations at Salt Point down the coast. And one of them was, you saw on the homepage, which was a square piece. And then this was the second. I never do the same design twice. There's only been a couple times where I've actually done the same theme, but different designs. So though that other piece and this piece are on those, based on those rock formations. And so to get a design like this, what I would do would be to take my photos, if it's based on a photo, put it on the Xerox machine, which kind of already you lose some of the detail. Possibly even throw that copy onto the copy machine, which simplifies it even more. And then just start cutting them up and moving them around and deciding how I want the layout of the design to be. So that was what I did with this piece. And there's a detail. Okay, let's just go to. This was a tulip that I was growing that was one of those really old-fashioned frilly tulips. I don't actually remember if I did this from a drawing or the photo, but obviously I, eliminated a lot of the detail. But what I wanted to point out here was just the background is not very specifically leaves, but just gives that sort of leaf shape in a more abstract way so that it gives you the effect of foliage without being really realistic.
How big is something?
That one,
Approximately.
okay, about like that.
Okay.
No.
Is that kind of a normal size for you? Or does it vary?
It varies. Yeah. Okay, let's go to this one. So this was a fuchsia that I actually still have in my garden. And here I tried to make the leaves more realistic, obviously, than the last piece, but with a really simplified background.
And size again?
About like that. Okay, so this is much bigger. This is about this wide by maybe that high. And what I wanted to do with this piece was I had taken some photos of koi in a pond. And what really interested me was looking through the water and how they become out of focus as you're looking through the water at them. So some of these fish are in focus and on the surface, and some are down underneath.
It gives it a wonderful dimension of depth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the side panels are woven in an undulating twill weave, and I was trying to echo that idea of different depths of water. So I put one color of warp on the loom, and then I wove sections with the 3 different values of the blue green in the weft, cut it up after, and I actually put a very slight padding in there, so it's got a slight amount of dimension on the side panels, and attached it all together.
Are they woven the way we're looking at them or sideways?
This one is woven the way we're looking. I decide just based on the design and the ease of getting the lines and curves that I want. So I do both. Yeah. So anyway, there's a detail. You can see a little bit of the undulating twill on the side there. Okay, then let's go to this one. Come on. Okay, so this one is a wedge weave tapestry combination. So rather than weave the wedges all the way across and then back, I chose to make those 5 diamond shapes. And so I worked out like, where do I need to stop? And then create, like, for instance, if I'm weaving this way and then I'm going to want to put a diamond in, then I have to stop and weave this way to get the bottom of where the diamond will be, weave the diamond, and then come back in and fill in from both sides. So this piece is mushroom dyed with some natural white and brown wools, and let's see if the detail shows. I used in the diamonds either boucle, looped yarn, or what do you call the really fuzzy yarn?
Brush.
Chenille?
Brush.
Not chenille. Anyway, just like a brush mohairy texture yarn.
So if you're making your diamond
Mhm.
and then coming back at it, how do you join? Because you aren't at that moment.
You don't need to join on the diamond because you're not making a vertical color change. It's just, woven step, 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 step. And the steps on a diamond like this are probably one warp moved at a time. So it doesn't create a visible slit. If it was a very steep diamond, you might have very small little stair stepping slits, but they would be, for this shape, so small that you wouldn't need to do the interlocking.
How many ends to inch are you using? All the same 8?
The first probably couple of tapestries I did were at 6, and then I moved to 8. Mhm. Okay, let's go. Okay, so this was a succulent from my garden. And so I believe I just did a drawing for this one. And I do a lot of framing in my designs. So different ways of doing framing. So here we go again with a different way to frame. There's pick and pick stripes in those very bottom corners. So they're very thin vertical stripes. And then in the third one up, I did color transitions of the pinks into the blue grays. And then in the top above the succulent, if you look closely, you'll see that I've mirrored the square on point shape within that solid pink blue blend. And one of the things that's common in tapestry weaving is lazy lines. Well, they call them lazy lines, but really what it is there's two main reasons for doing those. One is if you're going to weave a very large color area, like the top of this piece, and you don't break it up, then when you take that piece off the loom, those areas are going to, there's always a little shrinkage when you take a piece off the loom. When you put in even a single tiny little space, like the lazy lines, it won't shrink up quite as much. So if you have one area with a lot of one color and then another area with a whole lot of color changes, all those little changes where the joins of the color happen will have it relax in a different manner. So that's one reason to do lazy lines. Another reason is that if you're working on a big piece, you don't want to be having to scoot back and forth all the time. Or if you have more than one weaver working on a piece, you want them to be able to work relatively in front of themselves rather than, having to pass it off to the next person. So as a lazy line where you move over one warp at a time is going to show a very slight little line. To avoid that, you can move over 2 or 3 or 4 at a time and it won't be visible. So here on this piece, I wanted it to be visible. So I copied the diamond shape, and I don't think it's really going to show up in the detail shot. No, well, a little bit.
Yeah.
You can see it. Okay. The next one down at the bottom there I have, so I'm going to skip it. So
The chair here.
I'm going to not take too much more time. It looks like we're moving along slowly here. So this piece was much bigger. I think it was 46 inches, maybe something like that. And again, I used the pick and pick stripes in the corners just to give some more visual interest on the framing of that piece. So there's the detail. Okay, so this piece was done after going to, I think this is in New Mexico. And Deborah Scott and I went to visit my sister, took some photos, came back. And so when we were there, the mesa that you see in the center of the tapestry, Black Mesa, I saw the photo recently. It's in the middle of nothing. There's nothing around it. So what I did in designing this piece was took some of the rock wall imagery that we had seen on our trip. I made it so that it framed Black Mesa in the distance. I have the stylized hills at the bottom, sunset at the top, and then the 3 little wedges of wedge weave are to represent the culture of the Southwest and the Southwest weaving. So this is called Windows of Time and includes a couple of those little window designs in there as well to sort of echo that theme. Come on. There we go. There's a detail. And there's a piece on the loom.
Oh.
So you'll see this is pretty much all with bobbins. The Aubusson bobbins are these ones that are rounded on either end. Gobalon bobbins are pointed and have like a little metal tip, and they actually use those to push the weft down. I've actually gone to mostly weaving with butterflies these days because I'm doing such small shapes that when you're on a vertical loom, and you start getting up higher, the bobbins tend to roll down, and then you got to keep rolling them back up. So if it's a bigger area, I'll use the bobbins, but otherwise I'm mostly doing a lot of butterflies. So this was another mushroom dyed piece, wedge weave, where I intentionally made it curvy and undulating. I just wanted to see the effect of doing that. This one is Navajo Skies. And again, it was sort of a collage of images from a trip I took. I think probably this one was in Arizona. And so I have the stylized mountains in the background and the stone archway and mountainside. But then within that, I created, within the opening, I just created sort of a morph of a sunset and the types of designs that you would see in Navajo weaving without trying to represent any of them specifically. And then in the stylized sun, there's again, those just sorts of patterns that you would see. I'm going to just skip a little because I'm taking a while here talking. This is Nightfall, about yay big. And it was using wedge weave as a frame to create an interesting pattern with the 3 phases of the sunset. And if you look closely, you'll see that where each wedge ends is not in the same place. So the pattern, the design area in the middle has some asymmetrical aspect to it, which gives it a little more interest, I think.
Do you keep your drawing on the back? Like, how do you refer to your?
I actually brought a cartoon I'll be showing after, but I do. And then in this case, I had sunset photos and I would just pin them, tape them onto my loom. So my drawings leave a lot to be worked with as I'm weaving. I don't do really tight cartoons, and you'll see on this one. Sometimes I'll have, if it's something off the computer, I will have just print out a picture and on paper and have that posted on either side while I'm weaving. I might, for the hummingbird piece in there, I did take couple of photos from the computer, but I have little mummy hummingbirds that I kept right on the bench while I was working, because my studio originally was going to have a loft in it. So it has very high ceilings, and sometimes if the doors open, hummingbirds would come in and they would get trapped, and I would open the doors and windows and hope they would get out, and they didn't always get out. So I have these little mummy hummingbirds, and so so I had them on my tray at my loom while I was working. So, okay, where are we? I'm kind of running out of time here. Just show you this. This is, I think, my second tapestry. And you can see the boulder shapes. This was the one from the homepage that's the 2 pieces on the same theme. Oops. And okay. This is another Southwest piece.
Yeah.
When Deborah and I went on that trip, we went to Puye, which is some ruins with cave dwellings. And so for this one, I was sitting in this very shallow cave, and I took a photograph looking out through the opening of the cave. So what you see in the center of the tapestry is a pretty realistic representation of the landscape, and everything that you're seeing around that, I just made it up because it was black in the photo. And so, yeah, and then the design at the bottom was from an Anasazi pot that I saw on our trip. And so no, it might have been in a book, but anyway, I took basically this spiraling design that I saw in the pot, and I superimposed it on the interior of the cave, where of course it would not be. Here again, a combination of curving, wedge weave, and 3 phases of a sunset. I'm just going to go fast because I'm talking too much. Again, phases of a sunset over the ocean. Here's a different way of looking at doing framing with wedge weave. And this was one of my first pieces combining tapestry and wedge weave. And I'm going to stop there and show you some things from Pinterest. So some years back, Adrian Nicolaisen told me about Pinterest and Pinterest boards and pinning images to Pinterest. And I was like, how do you do that? So I started looking on Pinterest and saving images of tapestries that I liked. And recently, because I knew I was going to do this talk, I saved a bunch more. So there's over 300 on my board now, if you want to go look at them. And I decided, because most of us in this show are doing things that are relatively flat and generally rectangular, that I would just pick a few pieces out of those 300 and show you what else you can do with tapestry in a breaking free of the rectangle mode. So I'm just going to show you kind of quickly, and just so you can get an idea of what else you can do. Oh, okay. It looks a little different here than on my screen at home, different shape. So I think I'm just going to leave it on this page and not just get my finger out of the way here. Not click on each piece to bring them up. So let's see, for you, can you see them? I can't see it very well from here. Okay, so I'm going to start on the upper left, and that it's just not showing up well, but that's by John Eric Rees. And if you look at this one here, it's the same sort of effect, even though that piece is by Margaret Crowther. So that's having a base of tapestry and then these textural pieces that are, I have no idea how they attach them. I'm not going to try to explain how people did things. It's just to give you an idea of what else you can do with tapestry. So
it's not just two-dimensional, it actually.
it's three-dimensional. Yeah. So again, this piece right here is dimensional. Can you see how? Yeah, it's a little hard to see. That one's by Muriel Guerin. I'm not sure how you pronounce her name. The one that says, this one is also by, oh, I didn't get it on my list. I believe that one's by John Eric Rees as well.
Free form feathers?
Yeah, so they're individually woven, and I don't know how they're attached. Okay, so this piece right here is Maximo Laura from Peru, and the piece over here is a detail from a different tapestry. They're basically flat, but there's a lot of surface texture to his work, and you can go and do a workshop there, which I vaguely considered doing last year, but didn't. But if you look at the detail over on the right, you can see there's a lot of sumac, there's some pattern weaving. It looks like there may be some, I don't know, just a lot of different texture, which I think is pretty interesting. And he's considered a national treasure there. So this one here, I put in, it's basically a rectangular woven piece, but they accentuated the flow of the weaving by bringing fringe down at the bottom, which I thought was a nice touch. And because things are not laid out in quite the same order as my computer, I'm going to have a hard time figuring out exactly who did every piece. So I'm going to just not try. Okay, this one here, actually, oops, go away, is Rebecca Smith. It's 18 by 10 by 2 inches. So it is woven with, I believe, some kind of metal, probably wire at the top and bottom, so it can have a dimensional finish to it. This one is actually flat woven, but it's a really great, bring that up a little bit. It's a really great combination of pick and stripes, and just the variety I thought was really wonderful. And I really liked the way it compared with this one, which actually has open warps, non-woven, creating aspects of the design. And I'm going to just go quick here because Cindy's been waiting for me. So then a couple of interesting things. This one here, this is a Japanese woman. Lot of these textured yarns to really give that effect of the water and the waves. Ruth Manning combines portraiture and wedge weave in some of her pieces, which I thought was a really wonderful combination. And here's an example of breaking free of the rectangle series of masks. And just trying to get her name here. Helen Smith. Her tapestry name is Her Guest Helly. And she says on her website, she lives near a place called Her Guest. And since I'm taking so long, I'm just going to leave this here and let you just look around for a minute and turn it over to Cindy.
Wow.
So-
Thank you. Thank you. Tell us your cartoon before you go.
We're not done.
not doing
We're
that.
we're going to do that.
We're gonna do show and tell.
So how am I disappearing Ellen's here?
There we go. There, that's you.
Okay, but I want it.
And you want full screen.
Yeah.
Up here.
Okay. 1975, when I'm 18, before Lolly's program, I was a resident at the Art Center for the last year of a program they did there where every weekend there was a different teacher with a different medium. That's not gonna, there we go. That was my first tapestry. Then I started the first year of the apprenticeship program with Lolly, and even though these are kind of embarrassing, you get the idea of it was much more crude. But the fun thing about these is my sister and mother, who got most of my work, thought you needed to have them in plexiglass boxes. So that's what they did with all my work. How do I get rid of that? This is probably 44 by 20. I want to get rid of that floating thing. Remember, you
that light?
said how to this thing.
I can't see, hide.
Hide floating, here we go.
There.
Okay, thanks. All right, but anyway, so I'm working on my floor loom that I bought when I was in the apprenticeship program. It's a 45-inch Hammett floor loom counterbalance. And I love that loom. I still work on that loom because it's really solid. And I usually use a linen warp. This was from the same era in a plexiglass box. That one's in a box too, as that one is. I know that, and yeah, that one came out of its box. And so like Ellen, I wove for a while and did commissions. I had my wonderful little weaving studio, and then I had 2 children. Well, I didn't have a lot of time for hanging out in my studio, and I didn't weave for quite a while. And I'll run through what I did instead. I made teddy bears, sold them at Golden Goose, and I paint. I also still paint. That was for our living room. I'll go through those quick. And I actually really enjoy painting because, why isn't that one going? It's stuck. Help.
I think it's big. I think it got expanded. Now will it go?
Oh, thank you. I still like to paint. It's a great contrast from weaving because it's really quick. compared, and it's just a different approach. And I only have to have a few little tubes of paint and a paintbrush, and I can just set it up next to my kitchen table. I use acrylics and they don't smell, and it's very immediate. But I missed weaving. I had actually sold my loom to my friend Aurora for, you remember? She had it. And then when I just thought, I'd like to weave again, and she wasn't using it, so I bought it back from her. Oh, these were a line of boxes I did as well. Okay, so there's my loom. That's linen, which I usually use, not all the time. Sometimes I use cotton, but that's,
How many ends per inch?
well, until this last piece, 4. So my work has a different look to it. You can see some of it in front of Lolly. It's, I love the texture, but I can't get the same kind of detail with 4 to the inch. It's have a whole different approach. So first off, I went for geometric stuff.
Woven this way, right?
Sideways, yeah. And unlike most people, I don't plan ahead what I'm going to do. So you can see I don't have to in a lot of what I do. I can just weave the iris, and then I think, well, what should I do next? And then I do what I feel like doing next. And so a lot of my work is either very horizontal or vertical, depending on how I wove it. That I did this for my grandson. It has a bat and a snake in there. And anyway, I work in series. Usually I'll do one tapestry and I think what I would like to do different about it. And so you'll see like there's a lot of the same thing, but they're all different. That's at somebody's house. They're the same. And I get really fussy about these up in the branches. I'm like, no, you can't have any of the background trees branch overlap the front ones. And nobody's going to notice, but I get very fussy about it.
There you go.
And then those are actually swallows, not fish. Now you'll notice with 4 to the inch, it's tricky to get a lot of detail. You can do a circle and cheat at the top and the bottom where I won't go straight across. I do a lot of, is it called eccentric left? I do a lot of that. And the circles, I can make that work, but not on the sides because you're going to get flat sides. There's no way to finesse those other than just flat sides. So every time you see a circle, you'll see it broken up with branches or something. That's how I get away with it. I did a few of those. That's how I'm weaving sideways. That's the tapestry, the irises. But I just kind of sketch out some irises I see in the garden, and then I make it up as I go along, and I'm often climbing under my loom to look and see what I did, because I don't want to have it, I want it balanced, or I'll unwind it, because of course mine's getting rolled up into, and these are all big. Everything I do, I'll put like 9 yards on they're all the full width of my loom like that. So they're big. This is about 60 inches wide and 44 inches tall.
Are you reading from the back?
No, no. And I leave slits. I have slits all over the place. And no, I weave from the front. And then I got into my landscape ocean phase. Oh, this one you'll get to see. My sister went over to frames with glass instead of plexiglass. She no longer does that, though. I'll show you. I talked her out of it. That was just a simple one. Oh, and then I decided you could put little buildings in. And so they all have little slits between them, but see, they have little doors and windows, and I did a whole series of Mendocino like that.
Right, perfect, recognizable.
Then I use butterflies, lots of them. That one has a beach in it. They're all different. Okay, that one's got more headlands and a little picket fence. These are all at the bottom of Gordon Lane where I live. So I just go out. that's how I work. I can show you later. I don't have a cartoon. I just have a little sketch. And I actually tried to do the buildings like they are in Mendocino, the colors. I have little notes, yellow, white, blue. So it's pretty authentic. And then my grandson told me, I always make it a foggy day. Why don't you make it a blue sky? So I did one with a blue sky for him. Then now I'm doing my vegetables. This was my first one. And you'll notice there's no vegetables with rounded shapes because I'm weaving this all sideways. And you can do, so long as there's something coming out the end of it, it's not round. And that's, oh, this is my sister's. She bought this one. No glass or plexiglass. She came around.
Oh, that's gorgeous. I love the way she placed that.
I know, yeah. And that's being woven. And you see, that's this area. Can you see that? I'm rounding that off. That's not a straight weft. That's going roundy. A lot of the outlines around the artichoke leaves, and I guess that's cheating, but Lolly taught me I could do that.
You're wrapping.
No, I'm not. Where did Ellen go? You're pretty much staying, most of your weaving, you're staying horizontal, right? Not always. Okay. I'm always doing it wrong. Like you can see, to get, that's the only way I could figure to do it, like to get into the, like the poppy has a little, so I'm going like this with my yarn. But if you're careful with your tension, you can feel and, give it a little more room when I'm going in rounded shapes. And then also I'm careful to try to build up to a solid horizontal line as often as I can to use my beater, because otherwise when I'm doing tricky things, the warps tend to like get tight in that area and I don't want that. So my beater then separates it. Like I'll find the edges sometimes start to pull in, sometimes maybe because I'm sitting in the middle of the loom and I'm over here. So I try to use the beater more just for spacing, but what I use is a big solid fork, and my warp is like a tennis racket. It's tight and I relax it when I'm not working because the back beam only has one side of a break and I don't want to torque it. But I get it really tight and I still get a shed though. Pretty good shed to work in with my loom. And that's the one that's over in the gallery. That's big. That's 60 inches wide. And there's slits in between each little kernel of corn is a little slit. Because I don't do any of this stuff. I just leave slits. But that there was a little bit of warp left. That's an ode to Judy Keene. Remember her asparagus over in Sacramento? Yeah. Okay, then I got into my koi phase. This was the first one I did, but I didn't like the lily pads, so I decided I would make up some leaves that worked better for me, that didn't have any rounded shapes. Oh, and this was funny. I'll show you this quick. This is one of my fish. Can they see this? And I was ordering a lot of my yarn from a place online. And I would just get she would just have little color swatch, and it's R&M yarns out of Tennessee, but she got these wonderful New Zealand wools that were moth proofed. And you had to get on her site the moment she got them up because she sold them all out. And I ordered this blue, and when it came, I was like, oh, this is such a bright blue. How am I ever going to use that? And then a friend of mine made this pot holder for me. And I said, oh, look at that. That's just the same color blue I have. I could do that. And so lo and behold, I used a lot of that yarn. That's this one right here. Yeah.
Right.
And that's, this is a different one. That's a different color blue being woven, a little narrower. It's not the full width of my loom. And I am using shuttles for a lot of the area, but I don't go side to side at all because like Ellen said, I'm working with lazy lines all over the place, especially like when I finish mine differently. So when I'm doing my heading, I break it up and have lazy lines. It's broken at least 4 or 5 places. So I'm not weaving a continual linen stripe across because, and then also you can see, well, I weave the warp is woven in back up in a channel after I braid it, and it would pull so tight that pulls it anyway, but anyway. Okay, that's that's narrower and taller that my daughter has, and a different color blue that she liked better. And that's just a,
Did you take that from your painting?
yeah, you're right. I had done paintings very much like that. And I thought, and people sometimes when they would see that painting in my house has all my work in it, and they'd go, is that a tapestry or is it a painting? Because the painting, so I thought, oh, I could do a tapestry like that. Then I got into my seagull phase, and one of those is in the gallery. And then I decided, instead of just kind of random flight patterns, I would do more like that. And I was gonna show you, where do I have it? Here, oh. So this is as far as I get when I'm planning. There. That's my plan. I don't have any cartoon or anything behind me. And then I actually have cut out of heavy paper the shapes of the seagulls, and I'll put it on top of my work. And sometimes I get a little Sharpie out. And I'll mark on the warp where the wings want to go, and these backgrounds have about 40 or 50 colors. And I'll show you the back of, like, even that ocean one. The back of it looks like a shag rug. And I spend a long time finishing it on the back, because you'll find that wherever like there's a bird, it's a whole tuft of yarn.
Do you have birds in this one?
Not so much, but I spend a couple of days with my big thick needle dispersing the yarn and putting it back through channels and trying to get a lot of them just woven in. I guess they're not really woven, but woven in, and anything anywhere near the edge for a couple inches gets totally woven in, but just so it's not in little groups. Otherwise you'd see little poofs when it's hanging on a wall. That takes a few days to finish it. That's this one, woven horizontal. I actually did 2 of those because I made one for my mother, but while I had it hanging in a room in my house, I really liked the way it looked, so I did another one. And then this is for Carol. And she made me stretch because she wanted me to use all these colors that I don't usually use. I had to come here and scrub through the yarn room and find, I need orange and pink and purple and yellow. But I was happy she did that, because then I broke out of my rut. This I did for my daughter recently. It's very big because she bought a very big house. And then now this I have here. Okay, so this was leftover warp from my grandson's little tapestry. We had set it 6 ends to the inch, and there was warp left over because he didn't get very far.
Talk about your grandson's project.
Yeah, he's in an art program in Santa Rosa. He's a senior now. And he had to do something something out of his wheelhouse and try a new technique. And so he said, well, Cece, can I do a tapestry on your loom? And he doesn't live here. He lives in Santa Rosa with his mother. I'm like, well, no. But I didn't know how to stand, and he could take it we collapsed it, so he took it home. And he was like, oh, I want to do like one, like you did of Mendocino with all these buildings, and you're going to be at home. Oh boy. So I convinced him to do little squares like, well, he got a few weeks into that and he so lost interest because he had no idea how long it was going to take. He'd be like, I'm working hours and I only have 2 squares done, you know. And then when I finally had to rescue him and it was due like the next day, and he tells me he's coming up and, you know, he's pulled the top in its shape like this because I was, you know, he's on his own. Yeah, we salvaged it. I was able to block it and then mount it on a frame, and he got an A on it. That's pretty much all he cared about. But he doesn't ever want to do another tapestry.
You have a picture of it?
I didn't bring one, no. Sorry. But there was enough warp left on that loom. I was like, I'm going to try something at 6 ends to the inch. And I liked it and I didn't like it, but now that's what I'm working with. So there's the poppy that's still 4 to the inch. That's in the gallery that I did. And now I've warped up 6 inches to the inch, and here's my newest project. I'll walk you through how I do it. I start with collecting my yarn. Now I have about 60 or 70 colors on my table. And because I can't weave something if I don't have the colors, right? So here I've started, it's a big gardenia. This is the start of it. And this is further along. And so I work with butterflies. And that's it. That's me. That's where I'm at right now only. I'm almost done with it.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's the end.
Does it take for you to do something like that?
It takes a long time.
Yeah. I'm just-
That's like a month. I mean, I'm not working right now on this project. I've been working 8 to 10 hours a day. I told myself you can't get up before 5 o'clock in the morning. So I am getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's just really excited. Whoops, now we're getting into Elaine's. But it's a big commitment. Yeah. And then even after it's woven, there's still a lot of work.
Turning all the ends in.
Yeah. So what I do is I braid the edge and then it's woven into the channels. That's after, and then I'm working on all the yarn hanging out and making that neater and tidier. And then blocking it, which is like, I use a spray bottle of water. So I'm spraying both the front and back. And I put a big wool blanket and a huge towel on my table, and I use a steam iron. And so wool is like your sweater you have or your hair. The last shape it was in when it dried is where it's going to stay. And so I'm getting it perfectly flat on a sunny day where I can put it on a sheet on the deck and hope it dries. And yeah, a big tapestry is about a month of my time. I'm not all day, but yeah.
A lot more hours than I could ever do.
Oh, because they're big. Yeah. This one I'm,
Because I couldn't physically believe the amount of hours you.
oh yeah. I've been putting in a lot of hours. Anyway, that's what I'm doing.
So do you have any examples of the wool weft that you use? How big the wool weft is?
When you can turn.
Oh yeah, you can
Oh, I
see.
can take a look at it.
So
Yeah.
we can talk
Sorry.
about, yeah, you can look and see. It's mostly, I use a lot of just rug millins. I mean, yeah, from companies that make rugs, and when they don't have a huge amount of a color left, they sell them through sources. And for a while I was getting it from eBay on an auction. You know how those auctions are done at like at 2 o'clock in the morning, you have to get on and make sure to beat the people out. But now at 6 to the inch, I can't really use some of my yarn. It's enough of a difference. But I can still manipulate it. I go in and go back and cheat a lot too, like I'll say, I want to add more color and I'll go in with my big needle and open it up and I'll leave some more in, or I don't like that color and I might just snip it out of there and go in with my needle and, so I like to be able to have that option, and I still can do that at 6 to the inch. I can get in there and yeah,
Move stuff around.
yeah, but it's,
Do you do that all while it's still in the loom, or can you do it after it's off?
it's a lot better when it's under tension.
Yeah.
Yeah. When it's off, that's hard. I have done it when so I'll get it off the loom and go, oh gosh, I can't believe, because I can't see it. And I will change stuff, but it's a lot harder. Yeah, anyway, yeah. And then you can see, this is the linen that I use. I think it's a 8485 linen. And then, so that's all hanging off here. And this is braided, and the ends get just braided down like that.
Cindy, can you show that to the screen so the recording, people who watch it can see it?
Here we go. Yeah, so that's the back. So I don't want anything showing from the edge. And I use a pretty simple armature, even though you can see a little shadow in the front. I don't really care. I figure it's just structural, and I haven't gone out of the way. Recently though, my husband, Lee, he has started making my armatures at an angle. Let's see, which is it? He's angling off this corner that's showing on the bottom front. So it's not totally rectangular, and that's creates a little less of a shadow line there, because it does, I know. But I talked to Ellen about that. Maybe someday I'll try doing it differently so I don't have that shadow. But anyway, that's pretty much that.
Wow.
And here's just some, this is like, as far as planning goes, there we are. We've planned our vegetable tapestry. I actually went to the market to get inspiration. What else could I put in there that doesn't have a round bottom? But that's fun. I really enjoy the spontaneity of being able to do that. What do I feel like weaving today? I think it's a carrot kind of a day, whatever. And so let's see. Here's my little sketches for Mendocino. I take my sketchbook and my pencil to the headlands. And that's how I approached it.
And then you put the colors.
Yeah,
Like the
see, there's
colors.
Y for yellow, B for blue. Yeah. But yeah, that's it. So now I'm working from a cartoon though. I tried that red poppy without a cartoon and I didn't get very far. I was like, sure, I can do it from that. 44 inches wide, and no, I got lost real fast. So that's the first time I tried a cartoon, and now yeah, it's a stretch for me. Let's see, here's what I'm working on now, but I can't do it from that. That's a gardenia. No. But it's fun because there's still a lot of spontaneity. You see each petal has a lot of colors going on in it. Some of those petals have like 12 colors in them. So I'm still creating it as I go, but I'm like coloring in the lines in the coloring book, but having fun. Yeah. Or sometimes this morning I was weaving and I was so involved with getting the colors all blended, I forgot to look and I had missed shot where I needed to stop and angle over. So I had to unweave everything I did.
Oh,
I think it's all right.
so
I don't-
on the background of your gardenia is your background on your cartoon, or you just? making that
No,
up as you
no,
go?
that's just whatever I feel like at the moment. Yeah. And sometimes it doesn't look like what I had thought about anyway. I just, oh, well, that'll work. Okay. And so I didn't know. I've been rolling my cartoon up because this is new to me, the cartoon idea. And that's really tricky because it all one. So I stitched down, you can see that at the bottom, you can see I stitched it down. But I have to like pleat it as I go. And then Ellen says, oh, well, you don't have to roll your cartoon with your, I was like, oh, you're right. I guess I could just leave it hang. So it's too late now. It's already rolled up. But next time, that was a great idea. I love talking to Ellen. She has all these great, why didn't I think of that? So there we go. Yeah, that was fun.
Okay, so I have a question, which is, it is 12 minutes to 12 when we're supposed to be stopping. I wanted to share a little bit more about finishing and how Cindy and I do things. We also wanted to talk a little bit about Stephanie Hoppy's work. So I guess my question is would you like me to talk about Stephanie's work, and then anybody who it doesn't care about finishing can leave, or if you have to leave, does that make more sense rather than?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So, and we have a couple of other pieces of Elaine too, which you can look at when we're done here. So Stephanie could not make it. I guess, should I change this?
There are 3 of her pieces in the gallery.
Right, so so Stephanie works. Can we put Stephanie over there where it'll get, yeah, how are
I
we gonna do
pointed
this?
you at,
Oh, she just pointed it.
Oh, that's a good idea.
It's the Zoom, but.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit while she does that. So Stephanie had a career as an attorney and a freelance writer and editor before coming to weaving. And she says she wanted to do something of practical use in daily life as well as beautiful. So I'm going to read a paragraph from her bio here. Like Navajo weavers, I use the vertical frame loom perfected by the native peoples of the U.S. Southwest more than 1,000 years ago, a deceptively simple looking technology in which the weaver's own hands and body form critical components. I'm going to stop there and just explain a little bit. So most looms, at least my loom and Cindy's loom and all the looms in the room here, have treadles, and that's creating a shed alternating every other thread. So the Navajo style loom does not have any treadles. So how does she weave these pieces? So to create the warp, she creates a framework of 4x4s and then attaches a top dowel and a bottom dowel to that temporarily, and weaves or winds her warp on the dowels. While they're still attached on that framework, she twines the top and the bottom, and that spaces those warp threads out into the spacing. She uses either 5 or 6 ends to the inch. Then it's removed from that temporary framework and brought to her loom and reattached on her loom. So because there's no treadles on that type of loom, one shed is created by putting a stick in, every other thread up near the top, and that brings half the warps up so that she can pass the weft through. The other shed, that every other alternating warp, there's a heddle bar, and from that bar is the string heddles are created that go to the opposite threads. I'm seeing a look there. Would you like me to re-explain that? Okay, so half the threads are being brought forward by the stick.
Right.
The other ones, so there's another bar up near the top, which is not attached into the weaving. From that, string heddles go catch a warp, come back to the stick, catch the third one over, comes back to the stick, fifth one. So it's catching every other warp that wasn't brought forward first by the heddle stick. And then to get that shed You pull that forward, it brings the opposite threads up. You put in a stick that's flat and smooth on the edges, and you can tip it sideways, and that'll hold those threads forward so that you can pass your weft back and forth.
Is this her warp, do you think?
She does use a wool warp. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. She also hand dyes most of her colors with acid dyes, wool acid dyes. And
embellishes.
some of her work is mostly plain weave. Some of it is a combination of wedge weave. If you look in the gallery, she has one piece that's all wedge weave, one that combines, and then she also creates rugs, which are obviously reversible front to back. Whereas the
Show her back.
tapestries, now this one,
It's all
also-
finished.
Wow. Over that way.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
And she sent me descriptions of the piece, but at the moment I seem to have misplaced it. So then some of her pieces are pattern weaves. And I was like, well, how do you do that on a loom that doesn't have treadles and extra harnesses? And what she said she does is, I'm gonna move this over so you can pick this one up here, is creates extra pedal bars that might be attached to every third warp thread. So depending on the structure, there would be multiple pedal bars so that she can create. Yeah, look at that.
I'm looking at this in here.
You can really see.
Isn't that interesting?
Mm.
That's gotta be the wolf, and it's that thick.
Right.
Wow.
So there is a tradition also in Navajo weaving for doing twill work in rugs, and you can see does a combination.
I think it's important to feel this one.
That particular piece, she wove and then wasn't really satisfied with it. So she went in after the fact and did a lot of surface work. Maybe we can hold that one up again.
Could you hold it up to the screen? Is that surface work essentially
Is that
embroidery?
working,
Mhm.
Suzanne?
Yeah, that's good. Beautiful.
That one is called Ancient Rites.
Oh, see the back.
Oh, my goodness.
So a lot, that's all embroidered on.
Yeah.
It's real obviously a wool warp.
It's a lot softer in feel using wool and hand spun singles than some other pieces. Now, I'm gonna go back to mine for a second because we're a little late here. So I weave mostly with strands, multiple strands of thin yarns. Part of it is that it 8 ends to the inch. Even though I used to use a lot more thinner rug wool, a lot of it won't fit. So this is my newest piece, and it's got everything done on it but the stick that it'll hang by. But you can see how it's the finishing on it in a second. But anyway, so this is my newest piece. And I realized on my slideshow, I never got back to the newer pieces and what I was doing with those. So
Another.
another time. So what I started to do in the last couple pieces was trying to learn photo editing on the computer. And
Can that one go around?
yeah, sure. So the piece you didn't get to see, because I forgot, that was done prior to this one. was my first design using the computer and trying to figure out how do you do layers with photo editing. And so I created a piece based on entryways in Morocco where I went with my sister in 2022. And then this was the second design, again, about the entryways that you would see in souks and medinas in Morocco. And so those are the two that I managed to come up with so far using the computer. And we'll see where it goes. But I did say I would show you my cartoon, which is,
What is it on?
it's non-woven interfacing because it doesn't tear. So I can stitch it on, I stitch a couple rows of stitching on to keep the cartoon in place while I'm weaving. And then once I weave more and I put in the third row of stitching, I undo the first row, and that's how you keep from rolling.
And it's more
So-
pliable. I'm using butcher paper.
Yeah, yeah.
And it doesn't tear.
It doesn't tear. I just, to get it wide enough, I just sewed it together. And you can see, you know, there's a lot of, the main lines are all there, but there's a lot of areas where I'm just interpreting what I'm doing. So, and then you can see where that red felt pen is. I didn't really know what I wanted to do down there. I wanted to give the sense of the cobblestones, but I didn't want to, you know, weave every single cobblestone, and they weren't in my design anyway from the computer, which is here.
Let's see.
So I changed my mind, and that's the red felt pen on there. So what I did was I started with some photos that I took on my trip. I worked with them in the computer photo editing program.
Is that okay to send around?
Oh, sure.
So you can see.
And then I printed it off from the computer and I shrunk them small enough that I could stick one on either side of the loom while I was working. And
Are you doing that mostly for color reference, do you think?
color, yeah, and
Also
sort of
detail.
texture, you know, like, do I want to do pick and pick? Do I want, you know, it's a combination. One thing I didn't get into is because I'm always working or generally working with thinner threads that are bundled, is how do you figure out what color you're going to do? So these are like little twisties, little twisted bits of yarn. And so I'll take yarns I think I'm going to use.
Those have to go on.
Thank you, Laura.
Forever the teacher.
And, you know, I'll take whatever I think I'm, you know, these 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 strands, and I'll twist them really tight and then turn it, you know, in half so they twist around each other, and then put a little knot, and then I can take it and I can go to my tapestry on the loom and go, does that look like the right color? And if it looks like the right combination, then I sometimes will weave just like a little 1 inch of it and make sure that that's what I want. And if it is, then I undo that and weave the piece. And if it isn't, I go back and do some more little twisties. But I mentioned, you can also do this where they're not twisted, but it's just a record of what you used. Because when the piece is rolling up and you're like, oh, what was that I had there? It's really a good idea to just attach little bits to your drawing or whatever, so that you know what it was you used. And so why did I never think of this? But you're saying, what did you do earlier in the piece? While you're weaving, take some pictures with your phone. And then you can refer to that after, because it may be important. So, and then I just want to mention one more thing here, and then we'll let you go. This was the original design for the piece that's in the gallery. I did some collage work. I was trying to loosen up more, become more abstract in my design work. So I did some collages, and then I decided to weave one. So this is what I used for the design of the piece, looking into the light. And it was done with some torn paper and paint and oil pastel and rubber stamping. And I used that and then just interpreted what I wanted to do in the tapestry. So there we go. Any questions? No, poor dog. We managed to do it and get done at noon.
Wow. That was wonderful. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So inspirational
the
for
other
both of you.
work That's on the table that you haven't been able
Yeah.
to see, some of Elaine Todd's pieces. were
Yeah.
Interesting presentations, and a couple of Ellen's that are still rolled up.
Okay.
Will now go open on the table so that you can get up and.
Yeah,
come
so
trot
this
around and See
is-
everything.
Another, the wedge weave tapestry combo, and this is a very early piece, 1983. And if people want to know more about finishing, this is done differently than what I do now. This is using the Velcro. I brought some little cheat sheets on how do you do a double weft interlock from the front, if anybody wants that. Because I know a lot of people.
So I'm
Don't
gonna
think you
go
can.
over and open the gallery now,
Good,
and you
okay.
guys are welcome to hang around here or come on over there or whatever.
Where are your cheat
Thank you,
sheets?
guys.
Oh,